Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing not just scattered points of light, but a grand celestial blueprint, a divine document written across the heavens that once determined who could rule on Earth. Long before democracy, before constitutions, even before written history, kingship was not simply inherited or seized. It was written in the stars. Ancient civilizations across the globe looked upward to find patterns they believed mirrored the proper order of human society, and in doing so, they created one of history's most sophisticated and enduring systems of legitimizing power. This was not mere mythology or primitive superstition. It was a profound fusion of astronomy, politics, and spirituality that shaped the destiny of nations for thousands of years. Think about what it meant to be a ruler in those ancient times. Your right to lead couldn't simply rest on military strength or wealth. It had to be rooted in something eternal, something beyond human challenge. And what could be more eternal than the stars themselves? The same constellations that wheeled overhead season after season, century after century, became the ultimate reference point for establishing royal authority. From the banks of the Nile to the plains of Mesopotamia, from the Yellow River Valley to the jungles of Central America, kings and emperors wrapped themselves in celestial symbolism, performing elaborate rituals timed with planetary movements, building monuments aligned with specific stars, and even claiming direct descent from celestial bodies. They understood something we've largely forgotten, that human authority feels most legitimate when it reflects what appears to be the natural, unchanging order of the cosmos. In this video, we're going to unravel these celestial blueprints that guided ancient kings to power. We'll explore how Egyptian pharaohs used pyramid texts to join the imperishable stars, how Babylonian kings ascended ziggurats that reached toward the celestial pole, and how Chinese emperors claimed the mandate of heaven through precise astronomical observations. You'll discover how specific constellations like Orion and Leo were mapped onto coronation ceremonies, how planetary alignments were interpreted as divine endorsements, and why these ancient practices still matter today in understanding how power works. This isn't just about history or astronomy. It's about the fundamental human need to connect earthly leadership with cosmic order, a need that continues to shape how we think about authority even in our modern world. So join me as we decode the night sky's hidden messages and discover how stars once crowned kings. To truly grasp how ancient rulers wielded the stars as instruments of power, we need to step into their worldview, a perspective where the sky was not a random scattering of lights but a grand, ordered blueprint for existence. This foundational belief that the cosmos operated on a perfect, unchanging system of laws provided the ultimate template for human society. If the heavens demonstrated harmony and hierarchy, then the most stable and legitimate human kingdom would be the one that mirrored that celestial order most faithfully. This is the core of the cosmological principle of kingship. It wasn't about a king just being like a star. It was about him being an integral, functioning part of the cosmic mechanism, a crucial pin connecting the divine realm above with the earthly realm below. His primary duty was to maintain this balance, to ensure that the rhythms of human life, the seasons, the harvests, the floods, stayed in sync with the majestic, predictable dance overhead. A successful reign was therefore measured not just by military conquest or wealth, but by the perceived stability and order he brought, which was a direct reflection of his ability to channel cosmic harmony. This is where the North Star, or the celestial pole, becomes so critically important. In a sky where everything appears to be in constant, wheeling motion, one point remains seemingly fixed. For cultures from China to Mesopotamia to Egypt, this unmoving center became the most powerful symbol imaginable. It was the pivot around which the entire universe turned, the nail on which the cosmic canopy was hung. By aligning themselves with this astronomical anchor point, kings were making a profound statement about their own nature. They were presenting themselves as the unwavering center of the human universe, the fixed point of stability and authority around which all of society should rightfully revolve. Their legitimacy was drawn from this perceived immutability. Just as you could always navigate by the North Star, you could always rely on the king. His authority was as constant and dependable as the northern heavens themselves. This wasn't a vague analogy, it was a concrete political strategy, a way to make their rule feel as natural and inevitable as the turning of the night sky. The ancient Egyptians expressed this idea with breathtaking clarity in their pyramid texts, some of the oldest religious writings in the world. These spells and declarations, carved into the burial chambers of pharaohs, explicitly describe the deceased king's transformation. He doesn't just go to a pleasant afterlife, he ascends to join the imperishable stars, the circumpolar stars that never dip below the horizon. These stars were known as the ones who know no destruction, and by becoming one of them, the pharaoh's Ka, his life force, achieved eternity. This was the ultimate promise of celestial kingship. The ruler's power did not end with his death. It was transferred, perpetuated, and eternalized in the heavens, ensuring the continuity of his dynasty and the stability of the state itself. His successor on the throne was therefore not merely replacing him but stepping into a role that was part of an endless cosmic cycle. The king was the living embodiment of this eternal pattern, a walking, talking guarantee that the order of the universe was intact and functioning correctly on Earth. This fixation on the celestial pole wasn't just about passive observation, it was physically built into the very architecture of power. In ancient China, the Forbidden City in Beijing stands as a breathtaking testament to this principle. The entire complex, the seat of power for Ming and Qing emperors, was meticulously aligned on a north-south axis, directly oriented toward the pole. This wasn't merely for symmetry, it was a profound architectural declaration. The emperor, residing in the northernmost part of the complex, literally positioned himself as the human counterpart to the North Star. He was the unmoving pole around which the entire empire, his court, his bureaucracy, his people revolved. This concept, known to scholars as the axis mundi, or the world axis, visualized the emperor as the crucial linchpin connecting the orderly heavens above with the chaotic earthly realm below. His throne was the focal point of this cosmic alignment, making his authority a fundamental law of the universe, not just a political circumstance. We see a similar, yet distinct, architectural expression in Mesopotamia with the towering ziggurats. These massive stepped pyramids weren't just temples, they were artificial mountains deliberately constructed to bridge the gap between earth and sky. During sacred coronation ceremonies, the new king would ascend the long, steep staircases of the ziggurat. This was far more than a physical climb. It was a powerful ritual reenactment, a symbolic journey toward the celestial pole, the dwelling place of the gods. Each step took him further from the profane world and closer to the divine source of his authority. By reaching the summit, he temporarily occupied the center of the celestial sphere, communing with the gods and returning to his people not just as a man, but as a divinely anointed ruler, his legitimacy etched into the very path of the stars. The ancient Egyptians took this concept to its ultimate conclusion, believing in a literal celestial transformation. Their pyramid texts, inscribed deep within the burial chambers of pharaohs, are startlingly explicit. They contain spells and declarations intended to guide the soul of the deceased king. One such spell states, "You shall reach the sky as Orion, your soul shall be as effective as the living star." Another proclaims the pharaoh will become one with the imperishable stars. These imperishable stars were the circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon, eternally circling the north celestial pole. For the Egyptians, this wasn't a metaphor for a pleasant afterlife. It was a technical manual for achieving eternal divine kingship. The pharaoh's soul would break free from the cycle of rebirth and take its permanent place in the northern heavens, forever watching over and governing Egypt. His earthly reign was merely the first chapter of an eternal rule written in the stars. This widespread astronomical fixation from China to Egypt was anything but coincidental. It was a masterclass in political theater and psychological power. In a world without mass media, the night sky was the most public and awe-inspiring spectacle available. By deliberately and publicly aligning themselves with the most constant, unmoving feature in that sky, rulers were performing a brilliant piece of political communication. They were weaving their identity into the fabric of the cosmos itself. They presented their authority not as a temporary, man-made arrangement, but as a natural, permanent, and unchanging fact of existence, as reliable as the North Star that guided travelers home. This celestial association made the challenge of their rule not just an act of treason, but an act of impiety, a rebellion against the very order of the universe. Moving beyond the fixed pole star, ancient rulers turned their gaze to the wandering paths of the zodiac, finding in these 12 constellations a dynamic celestial mirror of the virtues they were expected to embody. This was not about vague stargazing for personal inspiration. It was a highly systematic process of mapping specific stellar patterns onto the required qualities of leadership. Think of it as the ultimate job description, written across the night sky, a cosmic checklist of royal attributes that a king had to demonstrate during his coronation to prove he was heaven's chosen candidate. The zodiac provided a ready-made symbolic language, a set of divine archetypes that cultures from Babylon to Egypt could adapt to articulate what made a ruler legitimate. By physically incorporating these symbols into their investiture ceremonies, kings were performing a powerful kind of celestial theater, showing their people that their character and capabilities were not merely human, but were endorsed and reflected by the cosmos itself. The constellation of Leo, the lion, offers a perfect example of this principle in action. Across multiple cultures, the lion's raw power, fearsome roar, and status as the apex predator made it a universal symbol of sovereignty and unchecked authority. A king claiming connection to Leo wasn't just saying he was brave, he was declaring his inherent right to rule at the top of the societal food chain. This symbolism was made terrifyingly real during coronation rituals. In ancient Mesopotamia, new kings would don a heavy lion skin cloak, its head often forming a hood over their own. This wasn't mere costuming, it was a transformative act. The weight of the skin on his shoulders signified the weight of royal responsibility, while wearing the animal's likeness was believed to channel the constellation's fierce spirit into the man, transforming him from a mortal leader into a celestial predator protecting his realm. Similarly, in Egypt, the pharaoh was closely associated with the lioness goddess Sekhmet, the fierce protector and enforcer of divine order, further cementing this Leo-like role. In stark contrast to Leo's raw power stood Virgo, the maiden, who across cultures was associated with justice, purity, and the nurturing of civilization. For a king to align himself with Virgo was to promise his reign would be characterized not by brute force but by fairness and wise judgment. This virtue was made physically manifest through the symbol of the scales. During their ascension ceremonies, Babylonian and Egyptian rulers would be presented with a set of golden scales. Holding them aloft, they would swear oaths to rule with balance and equity, their words echoing the imagery of the Virgo constellation, which was often depicted holding the same instrument. This ritual powerfully communicated that the king's primary duty was to weigh evidence and dispense justice as impartially as the heavens themselves, positioning him as the crucial link between cosmic law and earthly law. The philosophical foundation for this entire system is laid out in one of humanity's oldest stories, the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enuma Elish. This isn't just a myth about warring gods, it is a political document of the highest order. After the god Marduk defeats the primordial goddess of chaos, Tiamat, he does something extraordinary. He takes her divided body and from it constructs the orderly universe. The text explicitly states that he established the stations for the great gods and set up constellations whose patterns were like their likenesses. He created the zodiac, in other words, for signs and for seasons, providing a fixed, predictable calendar in the sky to replace chaos with cosmic order. This narrative provided the ultimate divine justification for kingship. If the chief god himself created the stars to govern time and signify fate, then the earthly king, Marduk's representative, was equally essential for governing society and signifying divine will. His rule was a direct extension of the celestial order established at the dawn of time. Perhaps no celestial association was more profound or personal than that of the Egyptian pharaoh with the constellation of Orion, known to them as Sa. The Egyptians saw Orion not as a random collection of stars, but as the celestial soul of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, resurrection, and fertile renewal. The pharaoh in life was the living embodiment of Horus, the son of Osiris, but upon his death, and crucially during the rituals of his successor's coronation, he was ritually transformed into Osiris, ready to take his place in the heavens alongside Orion. This connection dictated the very timing of power. The heliacal rising of Orion, its first visible reappearance in the pre-dawn sky after a period of invisibility, was an event of immense importance. A coronation scheduled for this moment was rich with meaning. It symbolized the new Horus king ascending the throne just as his father's soul, Osiris Orion, was reborn in the heavens, creating a perfect, seamless cycle of death, rebirth, and eternal kingship that kept the cosmos and the kingdom in harmony. This intricate system of astral symbolism created what we might think of as a divine resume for any prospective ruler. It wasn't enough to simply be born into the right family or command the largest army. To be truly legitimate, a king had to publicly demonstrate that he possessed the complete set of virtues spelled out in the stars. His coronation became a live performance of this celestial resume. He had to show the courage of Leo, the justice of Virgo, the regenerative power of Orion, and so on through the zodiacal wheel. By successfully embodying these constellations, he offered his people irrefutable proof that his soul was in alignment with the cosmos. His right to govern was therefore not a human invention but a divine fact, as observable and predictable as the stars in their courses. This celestial endorsement was the most powerful political tool in the ancient world, transforming a mortal man into the living, breathing expression of heaven's will on earth. While the fixed stars and zodiac provided a constant celestial backdrop, it was the dramatic, unpredictable movements of the planets that ancient cultures saw as the active hand of the gods writing approval in the sky. These wandering points of light moving against the fixed tapestry of constellations were interpreted not as impersonal celestial mechanics, but as deliberate divine messengers carrying specific political announcements. A king's coronation needed more than just the static endorsement of the stars. It required this dynamic, moving validation, a celestial event that showed the gods were personally intervening to bless his rule. This transformed astronomy from a passive calendar into an active political tool, where priests and rulers spent decades tracking planetary cycles, waiting for that perfect moment when the heavens would publicly announce their divine right to govern. Venus, more than any other planet, captured the ancient imagination with its dramatic cycle of disappearance and reappearance. To the Maya, it wasn't just a bright star. It was Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, whose movements were meticulously recorded in the Dresden Codex with astonishing accuracy. The Maya calculated Venus's synodic period, the time it takes to return to the same position relative to the Sun and Earth, at 584 days, a figure off by mere minutes from the modern calculation. This precise knowledge was power. A Mayan king would often delay his formal ascension for years, waiting for Venus to re-emerge as the morning star after its period of invisibility. This reappearance was seen not as a simple astronomical event, but as the literal return of the royal ancestor, the previous king's soul giving his explicit blessing from the celestial realm. By timing his coronation to this precise moment, the new ruler was staging a cosmic handover of power, a public demonstration that his authority was part of a divine, cyclical process of death and rebirth happening right there in the sky for all to see. On the other side of the world, the Romans looked to a different planet for their celestial endorsement, the massive, slow-moving Jupiter. Its stately pace across the zodiac, taking nearly 12 years to complete a single circuit, earned it the title the King Planet. It was seen as the celestial counterpart to Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the king of the Roman gods. Emperors understood the profound propaganda value of this association. Coins minted during the reign of Vespasian, for instance, show the emperor being handed a small globe by the god Jupiter himself, a clear message that the planet's divine authority was being directly transferred to the man. This wasn't subtle imagery, it was a bold claim of celestial right, a declaration that the emperor's power was as vast and enduring as the giant planet itself. The slow, predictable movement of Jupiter mirrored the ideal of stable, long-lasting rule, making it the perfect celestial patron for an empire built on order and permanence. Perhaps the most anxiously awaited celestial events were the rare conjunctions of the two great royal planets, Jupiter and Saturn. This meeting, known as the Great Conjunction, occurs roughly every 20 years, but a series of 3 consecutive meetings, a triple conjunction, is far rarer and was viewed with immense significance. In Mesopotamia, the celestial omen series known as Enuma Anu Enlil contains specific interpretations for these events, often linking them to the fall of one dynasty and the rise of another. Chinese court astronomers maintained detailed records of these conjunctions, believing they signaled a change in the mandate of heaven, the philosophical justification for imperial rule. A new emperor ascending the throne following such a rare event could point to the sky as incontrovertible proof that heaven itself had ordained a change in leadership, that the cosmic order demanded his dynasty and his alone. The waiting game for such an alignment could create immense political tension, with potential heirs and factions jockeying for position until the stars finally announced the winner. This practice of waiting for the perfect planetary alignment reveals the incredible patience and long-term planning that characterized ancient statecraft. A king's legitimacy was considered so paramount that the entire machinery of government could be put on hold for months or even years. There are documented cases in both Maya and Chinese records of interregnum periods, where the country was effectively ruled by regents or councils of priests while they waited for Venus to reach the right phase or for Jupiter to enter the proper zodiacal house. This underscores a fundamental difference between ancient and modern concepts of power. For us, a leadership vacuum is a crisis. For them, it was sometimes a necessary period of cosmic alignment. Rushing a coronation under the wrong stars was seen as far more dangerous than waiting, as it risked inviting celestial displeasure and ensuring a reign plagued by disaster and rebellion. The king wasn't just a political leader, he was a crucial component in a cosmic mechanism, and he had to be installed at the precise moment the universe was ready to receive him. The stone and mortar these ancient kings built with were far more than simple building materials. They were the physical manifestation of celestial belief, a way to anchor the vast, ethereal patterns of the night sky into the very earth they ruled. This was celestial architecture, and it represents one of the most ambitious and enduring attempts to merge human ambition with cosmic order. These structures were not passive monuments, they were dynamic, functioning instruments designed to capture specific moments of astronomical alignment, transforming the king's authority from a political claim into an observable, stone-carved law of the universe. By encoding star patterns into their very design, these rulers were creating permanent proof of their divine mandate, a proof that would stand for millennia, long after their dynasties had faded into dust. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza not just as a tomb but as a precision-engineered star pointer. Deep within its massive core are narrow shafts, once dismissed as mere ventilation channels. We now understand they served a far more profound purpose. One set of these shafts, originating from the so-called King's Chamber, was meticulously aligned. One shaft targets the constellation of Orion, specifically its belt stars, which the Egyptians knew as Sa, the celestial soul of the god Osiris. The other shaft pointed directly toward Alpha Draconis, the star Thuban, which was the pole star at the time of the pyramid's construction around 2500 BCE. This was no coincidence. These alignments were a deliberate architectural feat. The pharaoh's spirit, upon his death, was believed to use these shafts as a pathway to travel directly to these imperishable celestial realms, to join Osiris Orion and become an eternal, ruling star himself. The pyramid was quite literally a launchpad for celestial ascension, solidifying the king's eternal role in the cosmic hierarchy. This architectural language of the stars was spoken across the world. Travel to the Yucatan Peninsula and witness the magnificent Kukulkan Pyramid at Chichen Itza. This Mayan structure is a masterpiece of solar and celestial symbolism. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, a breathtaking play of light and shadow occurs. As the sun sets, the stepped corners of the pyramid cast a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase. These shadows connect with massive stone serpent heads at the base, creating the undulating body of a giant serpent that appears to slither down from the heavens to the earth. This is the feathered serpent god Kukulkan descending. For the Maya, this was not a neat optical illusion. It was a direct, scheduled appearance of the deity, an event that validated the ruler's claim to be Kukulkan's earthly representative. The king's power was renewed and made visible to all, as dependable and predictable as the sun's path itself, engineered into the very stones of his greatest temple. In the heart of Cambodia, the vast temple complex of Angkor Wat presents perhaps the most literal example of a terrestrial star map. The entire layout of the city temple is a staggering one-to-one scale model of the cosmos as understood by Hindu and Khmer cosmology. The central quincunx of towers represents the 5 peaks of the sacred Mount Meru, the axis of the universe, but the correspondence goes even deeper. Researchers have found that the arrangement of the main temples mirrors the specific stars of the Draco constellation, as they would have appeared in the sky at dawn on the spring equinox in the year 10,500 AD. The central tower of the Bayon Temple, with the giant stone face of the god King Jayavarman VII gazing serenely outward, corresponds precisely to the position of the star Thuban, the then pole star. The king's palace was not just aligned with the celestial pole, It was the celestial pole on Earth, and he was its fixed, unmoving center. These architectural marvels, therefore, were the ultimate expression of the astronomer king's power. They were not built by superstition, but from a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, engineering, and cyclical time. A commoner might see a pyramid and feel awe at its size. An initiate would understand it as a permanent calendar and a cosmic conduit. The ability to mobilize an entire civilization to build a structure that could accurately predict solstices, equinoxes, and the risings of specific stars demonstrated a command over the natural world that was nothing short of divine. It proved the king and his priestly advisors could not only read the blueprints of the heavens but could replicate them in stone, creating a fixed, earthly domain where cosmic law prevailed. His right to rule was therefore etched into the landscape itself, a permanent claim of celestial authority that no rival could ever hope to erase. If the fixed stars provided the eternal script and the planets the divine endorsements, then the sun's annual journey offered the perfect, predictable stage for the performance of kingship itself. The solstices and equinoxes represented moments of profound power and transition in the solar year, and ancient rulers were masterful at harnessing this symbolic energy. A coronation held on one of these four solar pillars was far more than a convenient date on the calendar. It was a deliberate act of cosmic synchronization. By ascending the throne at the very moment the sun reached its highest, lowest, or most balanced point, the king was physically aligning his reign with the most fundamental rhythm of life on Earth. He was presenting himself not just as a political leader, but as the essential human component in a celestial engine, the mediator whose rule guaranteed that the sun would continue its journey, the seasons would turn, and the crops would grow. The ancient Egyptians crafted perhaps the most potent link between solar extremes and sovereign power. The summer solstice, the longest day of the year, held immense significance along the Nile. This period of peak sunlight coincided with the eagerly awaited beginning of the annual inundation, when the river would overflow its banks and deposit the rich, life-giving silt that fertilized the fields. For the Egyptians, these two events were not just concurrent, they were causally connected. The power of the sun at its zenith was what triggered the flood, and the flood was what ensured the kingdom's survival and prosperity. To crown a pharaoh at this precise moment was to weave his identity into this essential life cycle. His ascension became the catalyst. He wasn't just taking power during the flood. His assumption of the crown was the divine action that caused the flood. His reign was therefore synonymous with abundance, fertility, and the unwavering reliability of nature itself, all under the sweltering, brilliant gaze of the solstice sun. On the other side of the ancient world, Persian kings embraced a different solar moment for their coronations, the spring equinox celebrated as Nowruz. This was not a time of extreme power like the solstice, but a moment of perfect, fleeting balance. On the equinox, day and night are of equal length everywhere on Earth, a universal symbol of harmony and equilibrium. For a new Persian Shah, this was the ideal celestial metaphor for his promised reign. His coronation during Nowruz was a sacred vow to his people. He was swearing to rule with perfect balance and justice, to bring renewal and rebirth to the kingdom after the metaphorical winter of his predecessor's rule, just as the equinox brought renewal to the world. The celebrations of Nowruz, cleaning homes, wearing new clothes, sharing feasts with family, all echoed this theme of fresh starts, and the king positioned himself at the very center of this societal renewal, his own new beginning powering that of the entire empire. The sophisticated use of these solar alignments wasn't confined to the great literate civilizations of the East. In the misty landscapes of prehistoric Britain, the monumental structure of Stonehenge stands as a powerful testament to a widespread understanding of this principle. While its exact purpose remains debated, Its precise alignment is undeniable. The primary axis of the monument is carefully oriented to frame the sunrise on the summer solstice and the sunset on the winter solstice. This was not an accidental achievement. It required generations of precise astronomical observation and staggering communal effort. It is highly plausible that this sacred space was used for ceremonies that invested leaders with power. Imagine a tribal chieftain standing at the center of the stone circle as the first rays of the solstice sun burst through the heel stone, illuminating him in a dramatic shaft of light. In that transformative moment, he is no longer just a man. He is the chosen one, appointed by the sun itself. His authority is sanctified by the most dramatic and dependable event his people could witness, making his leadership as unquestionable as the sun's return. This strategic timing provided an unbeatable narrative for any ruler. A coronation is, at its heart, a story told to the people to justify why one person should hold ultimate power. By staging this story against the backdrop of a solstice or equinox, the king was tapping into a drama that was already deeply understood and felt by every single person in his kingdom. Every farmer knew the critical importance of the sun's journey. Every herder planned their movements by the seasons. When the king's most important day was deliberately and publicly synchronized with these universal cycles, his personal narrative merged with the grandest story his people knew, the story of the sky itself. His rule was framed not as a human invention, but as a natural, inevitable, and necessary part of the cosmic order. He rose to power as the sun reached its peak, promising his strength would never wane. He took the throne at the equinox, vowing his justice would never tilt out of balance. In the ancient mind, to oppose a king crowned under such signs was to oppose the very turning of the heavens. But the king himself was rarely the master astronomer. That profound and specialized knowledge resided with a powerful, often shadowy, class of technocratic elites, the astronomer priests. These were the true architects of celestial legitimacy, the master planners who operated behind the throne, wielding the complex language of the stars as their source of immense and often decisive political influence. For while a king might claim to rule by divine right, it was this inner circle of learned men who actually provided the heavenly evidence, interpreting the cosmic will, and crucially, determining the precise moments when that will favored one candidate over another. They were the gatekeepers of the celestial blueprint, and their approval was the final, indispensable step in any royal ascension. In the great temple complexes of Mesopotamia, the Babylonian letter 1 E6 Dups Hachek Aa Enuma Anu Enlil, the scribes of the Celestial Omen series, were perhaps the most sophisticated data analysts of the ancient world. For centuries, they meticulously recorded every observable celestial event on thousands of clay tablets, planetary positions, lunar eclipses, comet appearances, and correlated them with earthly events like wars, famines, and the deaths of kings. This created an enormous database of cause and effect, a statistical playbook of the gods' intentions. Their ability to predict events like eclipses, using their intricate understanding of the Pharaohs cycle, gave them terrifying power. They could tell a nervous king years in advance that the moon would turn to blood on a specific night, allowing him to stage a public ritual to appease the angry gods and demonstrate his unique connection to the divine. More importantly, they could advise whether the upcoming conjunction of Jupiter and Venus favored a coronation or signaled a time of dangerous instability, effectively acting as the ultimate political consultants whose advice could make or break a reign. Egypt's version of this powerful class was the Keri-heb, the lector priest. This was not a humble temple acolyte but a highly educated scholar, often from a noble family, who was the master of ritual and sacred knowledge. During the all-important coronation and the subsequent said festivals that renewed the pharaoh's power, the lector priest was the director of the celestial ceremony. He held the sacred papyrus scrolls containing the precise words and actions needed to transform a man into a god, but his role extended far beyond recitation. He was also an accomplished astronomer, tasked with determining the exact correct night for the ritual based on the heliacal rising of Sirius or the position of Orion. Using simple but effective tools like the Merkit, a sighting instrument, he would align the ceremony's timing with the imperishable stars, ensuring the pharaoh's symbolic journey to the northern heavens was perfectly synchronized with the cosmos. His knowledge literally opened the door between the earthly and the divine, and no king could access that door without his guidance. Across the Atlantic, the Maya Day Keepers, or Ajkij, held a similarly crucial role, their entire identity woven around the complex interlocking cycles of their sacred calendars. Their mastery of mathematics and long-term observation was staggering. They could calculate the synodic period of Venus, the time it takes to return to the same point in the sky within a few minutes over a 500-year span. This wasn't abstract academic exercise, it was vital state security. A new king's legitimacy hinged on his coronation being scheduled during a favorable phase in the Venus cycle, often following its reappearance as the morning star. The day keepers were the ones who made that call. They could look decades into the future to plot out the most auspicious dates for a young prince's eventual ascension. Or they could declare that a current ruler's actions had displeased the gods, pointedly noting that the next Venus eclipse would signal a time of reckoning. Their astronomical predictions provided the unassailable, mathematical justification for dynastic succession, wrapping raw political power in the incontrovertible authority of celestial mechanics. This placed the astronomer priests in the ultimate position of kingmakers. While bloodline and military strength were important, celestial endorsement was the final seal of approval, and these technocrats were the only ones who could read that seal. A faction supporting a particular prince would need to secure the support of the priesthood, who could then discover favorable omens in the stars that clearly pointed to their candidate as the heaven's chosen one. Conversely, they could doom a rival by publicly interpreting a comet or an unexpected planetary alignment as a sign of divine displeasure with his ambitions. This gave them immense behind-the-scenes influence, allowing them to shape policy, steer royal decisions, and ensure their own temples and libraries were well-funded. Their power was not of the sword but of the scroll, not derived from command of armies but from command of the celestial calendar. They understood that in a world governed by the perceived will of the gods, the person who could read that will and who could be trusted to read it correctly held the true keys to the kingdom. The most powerful validation of a king's celestial mandate wasn't just written in the stars or etched into stone, it was performed in breathtakingly elaborate rituals where the ruler physically became the cosmos before the eyes of his people. This was the ultimate piece of political theater, a sacred drama where abstract astronomical patterns were translated into visceral, unforgettable human action. The principle of constellation reenactment transformed the coronation ceremony from a simple oath-taking into a full-scale mythological production, with the king as the lead actor in a play written by the gods themselves. His subjects weren't just spectators, they were witnesses to a transformation, watching a mortal man shed his earthly limitations and step into the eternal role of a star, a planet, or an entire constellation, proving his right to rule through his flawless embodiment of the celestial script. In ancient Egypt, this concept reached its zenith during the said festival, the Jubilee ceremony designed to rejuvenate the pharaoh's strength and reaffirm his divine kingship after 30 years on the throne. The centerpiece of this ritual was a seemingly straightforward act, the pharaoh running a fixed course while carrying symbolic implements, but this was no ordinary footrace. The course itself was laid out to mirror the precise pattern of specific circumpolar stars, the so-called imperishable ones that never set below the horizon. As the pharaoh, often a man in his 50s or 60s, sprinted between the markers, he wasn't demonstrating his physical fitness. He was reenacting the eternal, unchanging circuit of these celestial bodies. Each lap was a circuit of the cosmic track, each breath a gust of the wind that propelled the solar bark across the sky. By successfully completing this strenuous ritual, the pharaoh provided living, panting proof that his life force, his ka, remained as potent and enduring as the stars themselves. He was literally running like a star to prove he could rule like a god, his earthly vigor directly fueling the eternal machinery of the universe. Far to the east, on the sacred slopes of Mount Tai in China, the emperor performed a different kind of celestial reenactment known as the Fengshen ceremonies. This was not a display of physical vitality but a meticulously choreographed ritual of union. The emperor would ascend the mountain, which was itself considered a cosmic axis linking heaven and earth. His robes were not mere ceremonial garments. They were masterpieces of embroidery, woven with gold and silver threads to depict the major constellations of the northern sky. As he stood at the summit to make offerings to heaven Feng and earth Shan, he was visually transforming into a walking, breathing star chart. The ritual's purpose was to formally report his successful reign to the celestial bureaucracy and to receive, in return, a renewed mandate of heaven. By wearing the heavens, he became the literal point of connection, the human conduit through which celestial order flowed down to the earthly realm and earthly reports ascended to the stars. His every movement was a silent declaration that the patterns on his robe were not just symbols but the actual source of his authority, and his person was the needle threading heaven and earth together. Across the world, the Aztecs of Mesoamerica took a more dramatic, immersive approach to celestial embodiment. Their rulers, the Tlatoni, were deeply tied to the cycles of Venus, which they knew as Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the fearsome lord of the dawn. During his coronation, the new king would don an elaborate feathered costume and a mask specifically designed to represent this brilliant, warlike planet. The ritual then involved a dramatic reenactment of Venus's cyclical journey, its disappearance as the evening star, its period of invisibility in the underworld, and its triumphant rebirth as the morning star. The king, through dance, chant, and ritual combat, would act out this celestial death and resurrection. This was more than just symbolic, it was a metaphysical risk. By embodying Venus's descent into the dangerous underworld, the king was proving his own courage and his ability to confront cosmic forces and return victorious. His successful rebirth as the morning star proved he had the personal power to not just represent the god, but to temporarily become him, securing for his people the continued rise of the sun and the predictable return of the rains. These performances were the ultimate synthesis of faith, politics, and public spectacle. They transformed the intangible concept of divine right into something that could be seen, heard, and felt by every witness. A farmer might not understand the complex movements of planets, but he could understand his king running with the endurance of a young athlete. A soldier might not grasp the precession of the equinoxes, but he could be awestruck by his emperor standing atop a mountain, dressed in the very fabric of the night sky. A city dweller might not calculate Venus cycles, but he could be captivated by the terrifying and beautiful spectacle of his ruler dancing as a god. This celestial theater made the cosmos immediate and personal, and it placed the king squarely at the center of that experience. His body became the medium through which the distant, orderly heavens communicated with the chaotic, earthly realm, proving that his rule was not just approved by the gods, but was a necessary and active part of their eternal celestial performance. This claim of celestial ancestry represents perhaps the most audacious and powerful strategy in the entire playbook of astral kingship. It moved beyond mere symbolic endorsement or ritual alignment and into the realm of divine biology. A ruler wasn't just chosen by the stars, his very blood and soul were composed of starlight, making his right to govern a matter of genetic inevitability, a cosmic inheritance that no earthly rival could ever hope to match. This was the ultimate fusion of myth and politics, creating an unassailable family tree that rooted a dynasty's power not in the shifting sands of human history, but in the eternal, fiery furnaces of the cosmos itself. To challenge such a king was not just treason, it was a rebellion against the natural order of creation, an attempt to dethrone the sun or pluck a star from the sky. The Japanese imperial line provides one of the most enduring and explicit examples of this concept. According to the ancient chronicles of the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, the emperors of Japan are direct, unbroken descendants of the sun goddess Amaterasu Omikami. The myth recounts how Amaterasu, after a period of conflict with her storm god brother, sent her grandson, Ninigi no Mikoto, down from the Takamagahara, the plane of high heaven, to pacify and rule the Japanese islands. He descended bearing the three sacred treasures, the mirror, the sword, and the jewel which became the imperial regalia. His great-grandson was Jimmu, the legendary first emperor of Japan. This wasn't understood as a metaphorical story. It was recorded as historical fact, the divine genealogy of the ruling family. The current emperor, therefore, isn't just a ruler, he is a living god, a direct scion of the sun itself. His coronation ceremony, the Daijusai, involves a secret ritual where he is believed to commune with and share a meal with Amaterasu, physically renewing this divine kinship and solidifying his celestial mandate to rule the land of the rising sun. On the other side of the globe, the Sapa Inca of the Andean Empire wielded a similarly potent solar genealogy. The Inca believed their founding ruler, Manco Capac, was the son of Inti, the sun god, sent to Earth to bring civilization to humanity. This divine origin was physically enacted during the coronation of each new Sapa Inca in a powerful ritual of symbolic rebirth. The ceremony would begin at the Coricancha, the temple of the sun in Cusco, the literal navel of the Inca universe. The new king would enter a darkened inner sanctum, representing the womb of the earth or the night sky. After a period of seclusion and fasting, he would be brought out at dawn, just as the first rays of the sun struck a golden disk designed to capture its light. Bathed in this brilliant, reflected glow, he would be presented to the people not as a new ruler, but as Inti's own child, reborn from the sun itself to guide and nourish his people. His authority was as fundamental to human life as sunlight, and his connection to it was as direct and intimate as that of a son to his father. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh's celestial parentage was a core tenet of state ideology, perfectly encapsulated in his most common title, Sa-Ra, the son of Ra. Ra, the supreme sun god, was not a distant, metaphorical ancestor. He was considered the literal biological father of the king. This divine conception was not left to faith alone. It was spectacularly depicted on the walls of temples like Deir el-Bahari and Luxor. These reliefs show the god Amun-Ra in the form of the reigning pharaoh visiting the king's mother. He holds an ankh, the symbol of life, to her nose, and the moment of conception is implied through this sacred union. The resulting child, the future pharaoh, was therefore a hybrid being, a god in human form. His coronation was the moment this dormant divinity was fully activated. The culminating ritual of the ceremony, the crowning with the dual plumes, involved placing the mighty two-feathered crown of Amun upon his head. this was not just receiving a symbol of office. It was the final spark that ignited his innate solar power, transforming him from a prince into the living embodiment of Ra on earth, the sun god's true son and heir, now ready to rule. The sheer brilliance of this strategy lay in its simplicity and its utter invincibility in the pre-scientific world. How does one argue against a bloodline? How can a commoner or even a noble from another family compete with a man who claims the sun as his father and the moon as his mother? This celestial genealogy created a closed system of power. Leadership was not a matter of merit, charisma, or even military might, though those could help. It was a matter of divine genetics, a sacred DNA that could only be passed down through one specific family line. It made the ruling dynasty a unique and isolated caste, fundamentally different from and superior to the rest of humanity. Their right to rule was baked into the very recipe of the universe, established at the moment of creation. This belief system provided incredible stability, allowing dynasties to endure for centuries, even millennia, as it removed any philosophical grounds for challenge. To seek the throne without this celestial ancestry was not ambition. It was blasphemy, a futile attempt to rewrite the cosmos. The king's power was therefore more than political. It was ontological, a fundamental truth of existence as certain as the sunrise he called his birthright. While the slow, predictable movements of the sun and planets provided a stable celestial framework for kingship, it was the sudden, terrifying drama of an eclipse that offered the ultimate test of a ruler's cosmic credibility. Across the ancient world, a solar or lunar eclipse was a moment of profound psychological crisis. The sun, the ultimate symbol of constancy, was being devoured by a mysterious shadow, or the moon, the marker of months, turned a terrifying blood red. For most people, this was a time of pure panic, a sign that the cosmic order was breaking down and chaos was imminent. But for the most astute rulers and their astronomer priests, these events were not threats to be feared. They were unparalleled political opportunities. The ability to not just predict an eclipse, but to publicly incorporate it into the narrative of a new reign, was the ultimate demonstration of celestial mastery. It allowed a king to transform the sky's most alarming omen into a personalized divine endorsement, a celestial prophecy announcing his arrival and legitimizing his rule in the most dramatic way imaginable. The Chinese imperial court developed this practice into a precise science of power. Chinese astronomers, working as far back as the Han Dynasty, had painstakingly identified the Saros cycle, the approximately 18-year, 11-day period after which eclipses repeat. This long-term understanding allowed them to make remarkably accurate predictions. An emperor's court astronomers could announce years in advance that an eclipse would occur on a specific date. When that day arrived and the sun indeed began to vanish, it wasn't a cause for public terror. It was a calculated demonstration of the emperor's mandate of heaven. The event had been foreseen because the emperor was in perfect harmony with the cosmos. He possessed the virtue and wisdom to know the will of heaven. The eclipse itself was then interpreted not as a bad omen, but as a celestial announcement, a clearing of the old heavenly mandate to make way for the new. A coronation scheduled in the period following a predicted eclipse could be framed as the direct result of this heavenly signal, proving the new emperor was not just chosen by the stars, but anticipated by them. In Mesopotamia, the stakes were even higher, and the use of eclipses in political narratives was brilliantly documented. The Nabonidus Chronicle, a cuneiform text detailing the reign of the last king of Babylon, provides a stunning example. The text records a specific lunar eclipse that occurred in the month of Tashritu. Babylonian omen literature traditionally associated an eclipse in that month with dire consequences for the ruler of the West, which at that time was the king of Babylon. Nabonidus, a usurper who had always struggled with legitimacy, and his son Belshazzar, who was co-regent, were already unpopular. When the eclipse occurred, it was interpreted by the priestly class and the populace as a clear sign that the gods had withdrawn their support from Nabonidus's dynasty. This celestial disapproval created a power vacuum and a crisis of legitimacy that the Persian ruler Cyrus the Great was quick to exploit. Cyrus, in his famous propaganda cylinder, positioned himself not as a foreign conqueror, but as a liberator chosen by the Babylonian god Marduk to restore order. He effectively used the eclipse narrative to his advantage, claiming the heavens themselves had prophesied the end of one failed rule and the beginning of his own just and divinely ordained reign. The eclipse became the central plot point in a story of divine regime change. For the Maya, the concept of celestial death and rebirth was central to their understanding of power, and they applied it not just to eclipses but to the cycles of Venus with breathtaking precision. They observed that Venus disappears as the evening star for a period before reappearing as the morning star. They interpreted this period of invisibility not as an absence, but as a journey of the god through the dangerous underworld. A successful reappearance was a triumphant rebirth. Maya kings, or Ku-Hul-Ajor holy lords, intricately wove this cycle into their own narratives of succession. It was common for a new king to delay his formal coronation for weeks or even months, waiting for Venus to complete its underworld journey and reappear in the dawn sky. His ascension to the throne would then be scheduled immediately after this celestial rebirth. The public narrative was powerful and clear. Just as the planet Venus had died and been reborn, so too had the kingship. The old king's reign had ended, and a new, revitalized era under a new ruler was beginning, its legitimacy confirmed by the planet's glorious return. The king's life was now perfectly synchronized with the cosmic cycle of death and resurrection. This ability to predict and control the interpretation of eclipses and other dramatic events represented the pinnacle of ancient political astronomy. It flipped the script on chaos. Instead of being a victim of celestial whims, a king who could announce an eclipse in advance positioned himself as a master of cosmic knowledge. He demonstrated a privileged line of communication with the gods, showing he could not only read their intentions but could also prepare for their actions and explain their meaning to his people. This transformed a potential public relations disaster into a powerful tool of state control. The eclipse was no longer a random act of divine anger aimed at everyone. It was a specific, predicted, and expertly interpreted message about the transfer of power. By staging his coronation in the shadow of such an event, a king wrapped his rule in the aura of prophecy, suggesting that his coming had been foretold in the heavens long before he ever took the throne. His legitimacy was therefore not just confirmed by the stars, it was written into the very moments of the sky's greatest drama, making his reign a fulfillment of celestial destiny. These celestial blueprints were not just abstract ideas performed in rituals. They were often rendered in stunning physical detail, transformed into sacred objects that served as the legal and spiritual deeds to a king's divine authority. Among the most breathtaking of these artifacts is the star map sealing from the tomb of Senmut, the chief advisor to the powerful Egyptian queen Hatshepsut. This intricate astronomical chart, painted on the tomb's ceiling, is far more than a decorative depiction of the night sky. It is a meticulously detailed guide to the northern constellations, specifically highlighting the decans, the 36 star groups that rose consecutively on the horizon throughout the Egyptian year to mark the hours of the night. For a pharaoh, this map was a literal roadmap to eternity. It showed the precise celestial pathways his soul would need to navigate after death to join the imperishable stars, the circumpolar constellations that never set. But its power wasn't limited to the afterlife. During his reign, this knowledge was proof of his mastery over time itself, the very rhythm of the universe. By possessing and understanding this map, the king demonstrated that his authority was woven into the fabric of cosmic time, making him the indispensable link between the orderly heavens and the orderly functioning of the state. A different kind of celestial legal document emerged from Mesopotamia, known as a kudaru or boundary stone. These were not hidden away in tombs but displayed publicly, often in temples, to validate royal land grants to favored officials or institutions. A typical kudaru is a heavy stone slab covered in cuneiform text detailing the grant, but its true authority comes from the symbols carved at the top. Here we find a precise array of astral symbols representing the great gods who witnessed and sanctioned the king's decree. You would see a crescent for the moon god Sin, a solar disk for the sun god Shamash, and an 8-pointed star for the planet Venus, Ishtar. Often, the 7 dots representing the Pleiades star cluster were included, symbolizing the divine assembly. This was celestial contract law. The king's earthly authority to grant land was not ultimately derived from his military power, but from the fact that the gods of the cosmos had put their stamp of approval on the transaction. To later dispute the land grant wasn't just to challenge the king. It was to defy the will of the moon, the sun, and the stars themselves. The kudaru made the heavens a co-signer on every royal act, elevating a simple property transaction into a sacred covenant. The sophistication of these cosmic legal tools reached a pinnacle in China with the Dunhuang star chart, a paper scroll dating from the Tang dynasty that is one of the most complete and ancient star maps ever discovered. This incredible document depicts over 1,300 stars, organized into 12 charts showing the sky between the North Pole and 40 degrees south, plus a series of circumpolar charts. Its level of detail suggests it was no mere scholarly exercise. It is highly probable that such a chart was a central prop in the complex coronation ceremonies of the Tang emperors. Imagine the scene: the new son of heaven, having received the mandate, would be presented with this map of his celestial domain. His ability to reference it, to perhaps point out the positions of certain auspicious planets or constellations, would demonstrate to the court that he possessed the profound astronomical knowledge required to rule. He wasn't just taking control of an earthly empire. He was assuming responsibility for maintaining harmony between the human world and the vast, organized cosmos depicted on the scroll. This knowledge was his divine job description, and the star chart was the manual. What unites these vastly different artifacts, an Egyptian tomb ceiling, a Babylonian boundary stone, and a Chinese paper scroll, is their function as active instruments of power. They were not passive decorations or simple scientific records. They were the physical proof of a contract between the king and the cosmos. They provided a tangible, often beautiful, answer to the perennial question of why one person should rule over others. The answer was written in the stars, and these objects were the certified copies. They allowed a ruler to say, "My right to govern, to grant land, to lead you, is not just my word against another's. It is sanctioned by the unchanging patterns of the universe itself. To obey me is to align with cosmic order. To defy me is to invite celestial chaos." In a world where few could read written words, these star maps spoke a universal language of authority, written in the glittering script of the night sky and etched into stone, plaster, and paper to last for all time. While the daily risings of the sun and the monthly cycles of the moon provided the immediate rhythm for ancient life, the truly visionary astronomer priests were tracking a far more grand and slow-moving celestial clock, the great wobble of the Earth's axis known as precession. This imperceptibly slow shift, completing one full cycle every 26,000 years, gradually changes which star holds the honored position of North Celestial Pole. For cultures thinking in terms of dynasties and millennia, this wasn't an abstract astronomical concept. It was the ultimate metronome of cosmic time, the slowest and most profound hand on the celestial clock, and they learned to build their most long-term political plans around its patient, inexorable turn. The ancient Egyptians, with their obsession with eternal order, were keenly aware that their celestial anchor was not as fixed as it appeared. Their meticulous records, kept over generations by temple astronomers, revealed a subtle but undeniable truth. The star they venerated as the imperishable center, Thuban in the constellation Draco, had once been closer to the true pole than their current pole star. They understood that the mantle of the North Star slowly passed from one celestial guardian to another over vast stretches of time. This knowledge of precession was deeply woven into their theology of kingship. The shift from one pole star to another was seen not as a celestial accident, but as a sign of a grand cosmic transition, a changing of the guard in the heavens that necessitated a corresponding renewal on Earth. It is believed that the timing of certain major dynastic changes, the end of the Old Kingdom and the beginning of the New Kingdom, for instance, were consciously aligned with these precessional milestones. The pharaoh's role was to embody the stable center, so when the very center of the heavens was understood to be slowly migrating, it provided a powerful theological justification for the end of one royal lineage and the divine necessity for a new one to rise and align itself with the new celestial order. In the philosophical traditions of ancient India, this concept of precessional ages was formalized into an elaborate system of world cycles known as the Yuga theory. The great year of precession was divided into 4 descending and ascending ages, each thousands of years long, each possessing its own distinct spiritual quality and, crucially, its own ideal type of ruler. We are currently said to be in the Kali Yuga, an age of conflict and darkness. According to the texts, the coronation rituals and even the fundamental duties of a king were meant to change based on which yuga was current. A king in the Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth, was envisioned more as a wise sage governing a self-regulated society, his connection to the cosmos innate and effortless. In contrast, a ruler in the Kali Yuga was expected to be a powerful enforcer of order, a warrior king whose coronation involved elaborate rituals of protection and strength designed to hold back the chaos of the age. His legitimacy was thus derived from his specific suitability to guide his people through the unique spiritual challenges of their precessional era. His kingship a direct response to the conditions of the cosmic age he was born into. This sophisticated long-term planning reached its zenith with the Maya and their breathtaking long count calendar. Far more than just a way to mark days, the long count was a monumental system for tracking vast epochs of time, each cycle ending with a period of renewal and transformation. The most famous of these cycles is the 13th Bacton, which concluded in 2012, but the Maya were looking far beyond that. Their calendar systems were deeply attuned to the precession of the equinoxes. They calculated that the sun's position on the spring equinox would slowly precess through the entire zodiacal band over approximately 26,000 years, and they structured their grandest time cycles around this great year. This astronomical understanding directly influenced the nature of kingship. As the world age shifted from one precessional epoch to the next, the very responsibilities of the Keuhul Ajor, the Holy Lord, were believed to transform. A king ruling at the beginning of a new precessional age was not just a new political leader, he was a founder, a world renewer whose coronation rituals were designed to literally reboot time and establish a new cosmic order. His duties were vastly different from those of a king ruling at the end of an age, who was tasked with managing the decline and preparing the people for the coming transformation. The Maya king was therefore less an absolute monarch and more a designated representative for a specific segment of cosmic time, his power and purpose defined by his precise placement within the grand, slow wobble of the heavens. For a ruler who derived his power from the stars, warfare was the ultimate test of his celestial connection, a brutal, high-stakes experiment where victory confirmed divine favor and defeat could shatter a dynasty's legitimacy. This led to the sophisticated practice of celestial warfare, where military campaigns were not merely planned by generals but were scheduled by astronomer priests to coincide with specific, auspicious configurations in the heavens. A triumph on the battlefield under the right stars was more than a strategic win. It was the most powerful piece of propaganda imaginable, a public demonstration that the gods themselves were marshalling their celestial armies to fight alongside the king, making his imperial ambitions appear not just successful but preordained by the cosmos. Perhaps no ancient commander understood and exploited this principle more masterfully than Alexander the Great. Tutored by Aristotle, Alexander was deeply versed in the prevailing Greek belief that the planets were physical manifestations of the gods. He meticulously timed his most crucial campaigns to align with significant planetary conjunctions, particularly those involving Jupiter, the king planet associated with Zeus. Before the decisive Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, where he faced the vast Persian army of Darius III, Alexander's courtiers reported a favorable omen, a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus, the planet of his patron goddess Athena. He launched his attack under this celestial sign and achieved a stunning victory that effectively toppled the Persian Empire. Afterward, Alexander didn't just credit his tactical genius or his soldiers' bravery. He proclaimed that Zeus himself had ordained his conquests, writing his victories in the language of planetary movements. This celestial narrative was crucial for maintaining the loyalty of his diverse, multi-ethnic army, transforming an ambitious military campaign into a divine crusade sanctioned by the highest power in the Greek pantheon. On the vast steppes of Asia, the Mongol Khans wielded celestial warfare with a different, more terrifying logic. For these nomadic warriors, the most potent omens were not slow planetary conjunctions but the sudden, dramatic eclipses of the sun and moon. They saw a solar eclipse not as a bad omen, but as a moment of supreme opportunity, a sign that the great sky god, Tengri, was temporarily vanquishing the sun, their enemy's symbolic source of power and order. The great Genghis Khan and his successors were known to delay campaigns for months, waiting for their court astrologers to predict the next eclipse. When the sun began to vanish from the sky, they would launch their ruthless cavalry attacks. The timing was psychological warfare on a grand scale, as panic spread among their enemies who interpreted the event as a sign of their god's abandonment. The Mongols would sweep down, believing themselves to be the instruments of Tengri's wrath. The successful campaign that followed was then framed as the inevitable outcome of a celestial prophecy, proving that the Khan's mandate to rule stretched from the deepest heavens to the farthest reaches of the earth. In the heart of Mesoamerica, the Aztec Tlatoani, or emperor, based his entire philosophy of expansionist warfare on the precise cycles of Venus. Known to them as Tlahuizcalpantecutli, the Lord of the Dawn, Venus was not a benign symbol but a fiercely warlike entity. The Aztecs believed the light of the morning star could bring sickness and misfortune, and its phases were meticulously recorded in their divinatory codices. A new ruler would never think of launching a flowery war, a ritual conflict designed to capture prisoners for sacrifice without first consulting the Venus tables. The most auspicious time for attack was generally considered to be when Venus reappeared as the morning star after its period of invisibility. The rationale was deeply spiritual and practical. The planet's triumphant return from the underworld was seen as a surge of divine, aggressive energy that could be harnessed. By synchronizing their attacks with this phase, Aztec armies sought to channel the war star's ferocity, believing it would guarantee victory and provide a plentiful harvest of captives to appease Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, ensuring the sun would continue its daily journey across the sky. A successful campaign under these conditions was the ultimate proof that the ruler was fulfilling his sacred duty to feed the gods and maintain the cosmic order through warfare. This strategic manipulation of celestial events transformed military victory into something far greater than territorial gain. It became the undeniable public proof of a king's divine right to rule. A common soldier might fight for pay or plunder, but when his king could point to the sky and show that the planets had aligned or the war star had risen specifically for their campaign, it infused the entire army with a sense of invincibility and cosmic purpose. The resulting victory was then packaged and disseminated throughout the empire as evidence of a celestial contract. Monumental inscriptions, victory stelae, and court chronicles would forever after record not just the battle's date, but the specific heavenly signs that accompanied it. This created an unassailable feedback loop. Victory under the right stars proved the king had celestial favor, and having celestial favor was used to justify further military expansion. It made the king's ambition synonymous with the will of the cosmos, presenting his empire not as a product of human violence and ambition, but as the inevitable, orderly, and heaven-approved unfolding of a divine plan written in the stars long before his birth. And so we arrive at one of the most profound and binding rituals of celestial kingship, the moment a ruler swore an oath not merely to his people or his priests, but directly to the stars themselves. This was the ultimate act of cosmic contract law, a sacred vow that transformed a political promise into a divinely witnessed covenant with the universe. Imagine the weight of such a moment. A king's word, once given, was no longer a matter of personal honor or even religious faith. It became an integral thread in the very fabric of cosmic order. To break this oath was to risk unraveling the celestial machinery that governed the seasons, the harvests, and the movement of the heavens. It was a promise made under the gaze of eternal witnesses, and the consequences for betrayal were understood to be not just political, but existential. In the great courtrooms of ancient Babylon, this practice was etched into permanent legal form. When a new king ascended the throne, his coronation was formalized through a ceremony where he swore a sacred oath by the stars of heaven. This wasn't a poetic turn of phrase, it was a precise legal invocation, and it was meticulously recorded on clay tablets in cuneiform script. These tablets served as the celestial deed to his authority. In swearing this oath, the king was drawing a direct parallel between his own rule and the motion of the stars. He vowed to govern with the same unwavering justice, predictability, and order that the constellations demonstrated in their nightly circuits across the sky. His administration was to be a terrestrial reflection of celestial harmony. The stars were not just symbols, they were the co-signers on this contract, the eternal guarantors of his good behavior. Should he later become a tyrant or an unjust ruler, he wasn't just failing his people, he was violating a sworn pact with the cosmos, an act that would inevitably call down celestial displeasure in the form of famine, plague, or military defeat. Far to the north, in the halls of Norse chieftains and later kings, a different but equally powerful celestial binding took place. Norse rulers swore their most sacred oaths not on a Bible, but on a special ringstone or an arm ring, often made of silver or gold and engraved with intricate patterns that mirrored the constellations or the interlocking paths of the sun and moon. This ring was kept within a temple dedicated to the gods, and to place one's hand upon it during an oath was to literally tether one's promise to the cosmic order the patterns represented. The ceremony was called a staller, and it was believed that the gods themselves, particularly Thor, whose rings were symbols of unbreakable oaths, would enforce it. A king swearing on this ring was binding his destiny, his lineage, and his very soul to the fulfillment of his vow. To break an oath sworn on such an object was to invite cosmic chaos, to risk bringing the Fimbulwinter, the great winter that would precede the end of the world, down upon his people. His word became part of the sacred pattern, and to break it was to tear a hole in the fabric of fate itself. In the forbidden city of China, the celestial contract took the form of a reciprocal relationship, a solemn bargain struck between the Son of Heaven and the heavenly bodies. The Chinese emperor's coronation was not complete without the magnificent Fengshen sacrifices performed on the summit of Mount Tai. But integral to these rites were specific sacrifices made to the great stars and asterisms that governed the celestial bureaucracy. The emperor would offer jade, silk, and choice meats to stars like the Great Bear, which was seen as the chariot of the supreme deity, or to the specific star that was his personal celestial counterpart. This was not a one-sided plea for favor. It was the establishment of a mutual obligation. In making these offerings, the emperor was formally accepting his role as the terrestrial partner in a cosmic alliance. He promised to rule with virtue and to maintain order on Earth, and in return, the celestial powers would ensure harmony, good weather, and abundant harvests. This created a system of cosmic accountability that was deeply ingrained in Chinese political philosophy. A drought or a flood was not a natural disaster. It was a direct message from the heavens that the emperor was failing in his half of the bargain, that his virtue was lacking, and his celestial partners were withdrawing their support. His oath was a promise to uphold his end of a dialogue that stretched between Earth and the stars. This practice of swearing oaths to the celestial bodies fundamentally elevated the nature of kingship from a purely earthly office to a cosmic responsibility. It created a form of accountability that transcended human courts and mortal laws. A noble could perhaps overthrow a corrupt king, a priest could excommunicate him, but only the stars could truly judge a breach of this celestial covenant. The fear was not of assassination or rebellion, but of triggering a domino effect of cosmic disharmony, of causing the sun to falter, the planets to stray from their paths, or the stars to dim. The king's every action after his coronation was therefore performed under the unblinking scrutiny of the night sky. His oath was the ultimate check on his power, a constant reminder that his authority was not his to wield as he pleased, but was a sacred loan from the universe to be used solely for the maintenance of an order far greater than himself. His promises were no longer his own. They belonged to the stars, and they would last as long as the stars themselves shone down from the heavens. These physical objects of power were far more than ornate jewelry or symbols of office. They were meticulously crafted celestial maps, designed to be worn and wielded, transforming the king's very body into a living, breathing representation of the cosmos. Every crown, scepter, and robe was a concentrated piece of the night sky, an article of clothing woven with cosmic significance that declared the ruler's authority was not just approved by the heavens, but was physically composed of starlight and celestial patterns. This was the ultimate fusion of art, astronomy, and politics, a visual language that even the illiterate could understand, communicating that the man beneath the regalia was no longer merely mortal. Consider the iconic Nemes headdress of the Egyptian pharaoh, that striped blue and gold cloth covering the crown and shoulders. To the modern eye, it's simply part of the pharaoh's uniform, but to an ancient Egyptian, its symbolism was profound and specific. The two flaps falling forward over the shoulders were not arbitrary design choices. They represented the outstretched wings of the celestial falcon god, Horus, enveloping and protecting the king's head, the seat of his power and wisdom. Horus was the sky itself, his eyes the sun and moon, his wingspan the vault of heaven. By wearing this symbol, the pharaoh was declaring himself the living embodiment of the sky god, his human form now the earthly vessel for a cosmic entity. Furthermore, the crook and flail he crossed over his chest were not just tools of a shepherd and a thresher. Their specific shapes and the way they were held mirrored the precise configuration of stars within certain northern constellations, acting as handheld asterisms. When he grasped them, he wasn't just holding symbols of his duty to provide and protect. He was physically gripping the patterns of the imperishable stars he was destined to join, anchoring their eternal power within his mortal grasp. This practice of encoding the zodiac into royal costume was a global phenomenon. Across medieval Europe, the crowns of kings and emperors were often designed as miniature models of the celestial sphere. The most sacred imperial crowns, like the Holy Roman Empire's crown, frequently featured exactly 12 gemstones, a deep blue sapphire, a blood-red ruby, a vibrant emerald, and so on, each one carefully chosen to represent one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. The circular band of the crown itself symbolized the endless, wheeling path of the ecliptic, the sun's annual journey through the constellations. Some scholars argue the very concept of a circular crown, with its points or fleurs de lis radiating outward, was a direct representation of the corona borealis, the northern crown constellation, a celestial diadem said to have been worn by the goddess Ariadne. When a European monarch was crowned, the placement of this jeweled circle on his head was the final, sacred act that completed his transformation. It literally crowned him with the heavens, positioning his mind and will at the very center of the zodiacal wheel, suggesting his thoughts and decrees would now be in perfect alignment with the cosmic forces governing fate and time. The Aztec rulers of Mesoamerica took this concept of celestial costuming to its most spectacular and literal extreme. For his coronation, the newly chosen Tlatoni would be adorned in a breathtaking ensemble known as the Zuhuitzali, a turquoise mosaic mantle and headdress of unimaginable complexity and value. Artisans would spend countless hours meticulously setting thousands of pieces of iridescent turquoise, a stone sacred to the Aztecs for its sky blue color, into a base of wood or leather to create a specific, shimmering pattern. This was not an abstract design, it was a direct map of the night sky as it would appear on a specific, auspicious date. The arrangement of the turquoise tiles replicated the positions of the most important stars and constellations, particularly those in the northern sky. Draped in this heavy, glittering garment, the Aztec emperor became a walking planetarium. As he moved under the sun, the light would catch the countless facets of the turquoise, making the star patterns on his body shimmer and come alive. He didn't just represent the sky, he was the sky. His every movement was a celestial event, his physical presence a constant, dazzling reminder to his subjects that the boundary between their king and the cosmos had been utterly dissolved. His authority was as vast, as deep, and as beautiful as the star-filled vault of night itself. In the ancient world, time was not a uniform, abstract concept measured by identical ticks of a clock. It was a fluid, sacred force directly governed by the observable heavens, and the ultimate authority to measure and declare its passage was among the most potent powers a king could wield. This control over the calendar was far more than an administrative duty. It was a profound demonstration of the ruler's role as the chief intermediary between the celestial order and earthly chaos. By dictating the start of the new year, the insertion of leap months, and the very rhythm of days, a king was doing nothing less than synchronizing human existence with the divine clockwork of the cosmos. His ability to accurately predict and announce these cycles was the ultimate proof that his reign was not a disruption of the natural order, but its most essential earthly component. To control time was to hold the very thread of life in one's hands, and ancient rulers guarded this privilege with immense seriousness, knowing it was the bedrock of their legitimacy. The Roman approach to this power provides a stunningly clear example of how celestial timekeeping could be harnessed for political consolidation. Before Julius Caesar, the Roman calendar was a notoriously messy affair, a lunar system that drifted steadily out of sync with the solar year, requiring the pontifices, the high priests, to arbitrarily insert an intercalary month. This power was often manipulated for political gain, extending the terms of friendly magistrates or shortening those of rivals. When Caesar became Pontifex Maximus, he used his absolute authority to sweep this chaotic system aside. Drawing on the wisdom of Alexandrian astronomers, he implemented the Julian calendar in 45 BCE, a solar-based system that aligned the civil year almost perfectly with the Earth's journey around the Sun. This was a revolutionary act of political theater. By reforming the calendar, Caesar wasn't just tidying up an administrative nightmare. He was demonstrating that his rule could impose a new, rational, and lasting order on time itself, an order that mirrored the unerring motion of the celestial bodies. The calendar became a permanent monument to his power, a daily reminder in the life of every Roman citizen that the new era of stability and order flowed directly from the wisdom and authority of their leader. On another continent, the Maya kings, or Kayuhul-Ajor, took this concept of temporal mastery to an astounding level of complexity. Their entire system of governance was interwoven with a dizzying array of interlocking calendars, each tracking a different celestial cycle. The 260-day sacred round, or Tzolk'in, meshed with the 365-day vague year, or Hob, to create a 52-year calendar round. But towering over these was the long count, a linear chronology that placed any given day within a grand cycle of thousands of years. A Maya king's coronation was the ultimate public examination of his command over this complex system. He was required to demonstrate his understanding of these cycles, to show that he could calculate the precise positions of Venus, Mars, and the Sun, and to prove he could foresee the auguries associated with each combination of dates. His ability to do this was not academic, it was the core of his divine right to rule. By personally overseeing the calendar, the king proved he could maintain the fragile balance between the celestial cycles and the agricultural, ritual, and political life of his people. He was the master conductor of a cosmic orchestra, ensuring every section, the planets, the stars, the seasons, and his subjects played in perfect, harmonious time. In China, the emperor's role as the Son of Heaven made his command of the calendar the very proof of his possession of the mandate of heaven. Each year, his court astronomers would prepare a new almanac, a detailed document that was far more than a simple list of dates. It was a complete guide to life, dictating the most auspicious days for everything from planting crops and getting married to launching military campaigns and conducting state ceremonies. The most critical date in this entire almanac was the emperor's own coronation day, which was marked and celebrated as a celestial event in its own right, a permanent fixture in the annual cycle of heavens. The issuance of this calendar was an act of supreme authority. By distributing it throughout the empire, the emperor was not merely providing a useful tool, he was imposing his own temporal order on every single facet of his subjects' lives. His rule became the organizing principle of time itself. To follow the imperial calendar was to actively participate in the cosmic harmony he was tasked with maintaining. A miscalculation, like a failed prediction of an eclipse, was therefore not a simple scientific error. It was a catastrophic failure of the emperor's virtue, a sign that he had lost the mandate and that chaos was imminent. His control of the calendar was the ultimate barometer of his fitness to rule. This authority to measure and declare time positioned the king as the indispensable bridge between two realms. For the common person, daily life was experienced as a series of unpredictable events, unpredictable weather, irregular harvests, and the sudden outbreak of disease. The cosmos, however, presented a vision of perfect, predictable order. The sun always rose, the stars always wheeled in their seasons, and the planets always followed their calculated path. The king, through his control of the calendar, was the sole human who could interpret this celestial order and translate it into a structure for human society. He gave chaos a shape. By announcing the new year, he promised renewal. By declaring the start of the planting season based on stellar observations, he guaranteed abundance. By marking holy days tied to solstices and equinoxes, he provided moments of sacred order. He was the linchpin that held the chaotic human experience firmly within the orderly embrace of cosmic reality, and his right to wield that power was proven every time the sun rose on a new day that he had decreed. This final transformation, this celestial ascension of the king, was the ultimate and most logical conclusion of a lifetime spent in alignment with the stars. If his coronation was the moment he was infused with cosmic power, and his reign a continuous performance of celestial harmony, then his death was never an end. It was the glorious and long-awaited graduation, the moment he shed his mortal coil entirely to take his permanent, shining place in the heavens above. This belief was not a comforting metaphor to ease the pain of loss. It was a genuine, foundational pillar of state ideology that provided unshakable continuity and justified the very existence of dynastic rule. The old king's departure was not a vacuum of power but a relocation of it, a promotion to a higher office in the cosmic government where he could watch over and actively guide his successor from a far more powerful vantage point. The ancient Egyptians left us the most explicit and detailed roadmaps for this journey, carved in stone for eternity within the burial chambers of the pyramids. These pyramid texts are not merely funerary prayers, they are technical manuals, a series of spells and incantations designed to guide the soul of the deceased pharaoh through the perilous Juwat, the underworld, and safely into the northern sky. One spell, uttered thousands of years ago, commands, "You shall reach the sky as Orion, your soul shall be as effective as the living star." Another proclaims, "The king is a star, the brilliant one who accompanies the sun. The king appears again as a star." The destination was always the same, the circumpolar stars, those imperishable ones that never set below the horizon, eternally circling the celestial pole in an undying dance. By joining them, the pharaoh's Ka, his life force, achieved a form of eternity that was actively powerful, not passively peaceful. He became a fixed and eternal part of the cosmic machinery, a divine ancestor who could now directly intervene in the affairs of Egypt, ensuring the annual Nile flood and protecting the land from its enemies. His son and successor on the throne was therefore not replacing him, but stepping into an office that was part of an endless divine cycle, forever guided by his father's starry gaze. On the other side of the world, Chinese emperors sought to engineer this celestial journey through the most exquisite and precious materials on Earth. They were buried in suits meticulously crafted from thousands of plaques of jade, painstakingly woven together with gold or silver wire. Jade was chosen not for its beauty alone, but for its mystical properties. The Chinese believed jade possessed a unique vitality and purity that could protect the body from decay and ward off evil spirits. But crucially, many of these suits, particularly those from the Han Dynasty, were not blank. The plaques were often carved or arranged with precise patterns that mirrored the constellations of the northern sky, particularly the Big Dipper, which was seen as the chariot of the supreme deity and the axis of the celestial bureaucracy. Wrapped in this astronomically coded armor, the emperor's body became a sealed vessel, a protected capsule designed to navigate the spiritual realms. The jade preserved his physical form as an anchor for his soul, while the star maps provided a literal navigation chart, guiding him on his posthumous journey to take his appointed place among the celestial officials, from where he could continue to bless his dynasty and his people with heavenly favor. For the Maya, the destination of this ultimate journey was not a constellation but a planet. They observed that Venus, as the morning star, would disappear for a period, journey through the underworld, and then triumphantly reappear. This cycle of death and rebirth made it the perfect celestial counterpart for their deified kings, the Kayuhul Ajor. The Maya did not believe their rulers simply went to a static afterlife. They underwent a transformation as dynamic and predictable as the planet itself. Upon death, the king's soul would battle through the horrors of Xibalba, the underworld, and if successful, would be reborn as the brilliant morning star. This was not a metaphorical honor, it was a literal change of state. As the Venus god, the deceased king would continue to play an active, influential role in the world of the living. His successor would make offerings and conduct rituals not just to a memory, but to a visible, powerful celestial entity. The new king would carefully observe the phases of Venus, timing his military campaigns and important decisions based on the perceived will and position of his royal predecessor, now shining down from the sky. This created a seamless loop of power where the living king was always acting in concert with the celestial king, his authority constantly validated and guided by the unwavering cycle of the planet. This profound belief in a stellar afterlife fundamentally shaped the political stability of these ancient cultures. It created a powerful theological argument against rebellion or dynastic challenge. If the previous king was not truly dead but had been physically transformed into a star or a planet, then his chosen heir was quite literally the representative of a celestial power. To challenge the new king's authority was not merely a political coup, it was an act of cosmic rebellion, a foolish attempt to fight the very order of the heavens. The star god ancestor would surely withdraw his favor, causing droughts, famines, and military defeat for the entire kingdom. This belief system provided a powerful incentive for loyalty and continuity, binding the fate of the nation to the stability of the royal bloodline. The king's mortal death was thus transformed from a moment of potential crisis into a reaffirmation of the eternal, celestial nature of kingship itself, proving that true power never dies, it simply changes its address from the palace to the cosmos. But this celestial endorsement was a double-edged sword. For all the power a king could derive from favorable stars and planetary alignments, the ancient sky was also a fickle and terrifying court of appeal, capable of delivering the most devastating verdicts. A comet's sudden apparition, an unpredicted eclipse darkening the sun, or a planet pausing and moving backward in its course, these were not mere anomalies to ancient observers. They were screaming headlines from the heavens, interpreted as direct expressions of divine anger and the ultimate withdrawal of celestial support. This created a profound system of cosmic accountability, where the universe itself could act as a check on a ruler's power, forcing even the most absolute monarch to answer to an authority higher than his own. The Chinese imperial system, with its foundational concept of the mandate of heaven, had this accountability mechanism built directly into its political philosophy. The mandate was not a one-time grant. It was a conditional loan contingent on the emperor's virtue and his ability to maintain harmony between heaven and earth. An unexpected celestial event, like a solar eclipse that court astronomers had failed to predict, was the most severe warning imaginable. It was read as incontrovertible proof that the emperor's virtue was deficient, that he had lost the delicate balance required to keep his mandate. The response was not private contemplation but public, performative atonement. Historical records describe emperors donning plain robes, reducing their meals, and opening the state granaries to feed the poor following such an omen. They would issue edicts accepting full responsibility for the heavenly sign, asking their ministers to openly criticize their failures. This was a desperate attempt to demonstrate humility and corrective action to both their people and the watching cosmos, to prove they were still worthy of the title Son of Heaven. A failed response could indeed trigger revolts, as local governors and military leaders, seeing the eclipse as a green light from heaven, might move to overthrow a ruler now deemed illegitimate by the highest authority. In the Roman world, the relationship between rulers and bad omens was often more brutally direct. Roman augurs and astrologers meticulously tracked celestial phenomena, and comets in particular were almost universally feared as harbingers of revolution and death. These long-haired stars were seen as celestial disruptions, unclean and chaotic intrusions into the orderly cosmos. When one appeared, the public anxiety was palpable, and that anxiety invariably focused on the person of the emperor. The death of Julius Caesar was famously followed by a comet so bright it was visible in daylight during his funeral games, which his heir Augustus later used to his advantage, promoting the idea that it was Caesar's soul ascending to divinity. But for a living emperor, a comet was a threat. The paranoid Emperor Nero lived in terror of a prophecy that he would be overthrown by a future ruler, and the appearance of a comet during his reign sent him into a fury, ordering the execution of numerous potential rivals in a vain attempt to thwart the celestial warning. In other cases, the comet itself became the justification for assassination. If the heavens were visibly rejecting the current ruler, his removal could be framed not as murderous treason but as a pious act of aligning the state with the divine will, a necessary sacrifice to restore celestial order. Perhaps no historical figure embodies the devastating power of a celestial omen more than the Aztec Huitzilopochtli Moctezuma II. In the years just before the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived on the shores of Mexico, a series of terrifying omens were recorded by Aztec chroniclers. 8 years before the Spaniards landed, a comet appeared in the eastern sky, burning by day and by night for an entire year. This was followed by a mysterious fire that destroyed the temple of Huitzilopochtli, the patron god of the Aztecs, and other strange signs. To Moctezuma and his priests, these were not random natural events. They were a sequence of unequivocal messages. The comet, in particular, was interpreted as a sure sign that the cosmic cycle associated with his reign was coming to a catastrophic end, and that the return of the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, a central figure in Mesoamerican mythology who had departed eastward with a promise to return, was imminent. When Cortés did indeed arrive from the east in the year 1 read on the Aztec calendar, the very year prophesied for Quetzalcoatl's return, Moctezuma was psychologically paralyzed. His celestial mandate, the very foundation of his immense power, had been publicly revoked by the heavens themselves. This profound belief that the gods had already abandoned him crippled his ability to respond decisively to the Spanish threat, contributing significantly to the eventual downfall of his entire empire. The stars had not just predicted his fall, they had actively engineered it by shattering his will. This constant threat of celestial disapproval created a fascinating and powerful check on royal authority. A king might command vast armies and wield the power of life and death over his subjects, but he was ultimately answerable to the court of the heavens. His court astronomers were not just employees, they were independent auditors of his performance, whose primary loyalty was to the truth of the celestial patterns. They could deliver news that no human courtier would dare utter. This system forced a degree of accountability that was unheard of in other forms of absolute rule. A ruler had to be mindful that tyranny, corruption, or incompetence might not just lead to human rebellion, but to a very public and terrifying bill of indictment written across the sky for all to see. It meant that to maintain power, a king had to continually prove his worthiness, not just through military success or wealth, but through just governance, piety, and the maintenance of cosmic order. In this way, the ancient practice of celestial kingship contained within it a remarkable paradox. It was a tool for legitimizing absolute power, but it also embedded within that system a built-in mechanism for its revocation, making the timeless and silent stars the most powerful political opponents a king could ever face. While most rulers were content to simply borrow the authority of existing constellations, the most ambitious kings dared to go a step further. They became celestial authors, literally rewriting the starry script of the heavens to immortalize their own reigns and legacies. This practice of constellation creation represents the absolute pinnacle of astral propaganda, a breathtaking display of power that demonstrated a ruler's authority was not just endorsed by the cosmos, but could actually command and reshape it. To add a new pattern to the night sky was to leave a permanent signature on the universe itself, a declaration that a king's influence was so vast it could extend beyond the earthly realm and into the very fabric of the divine. The Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt, those Greek rulers who positioned themselves as the heirs to the Pharaohs, were particularly adept at this form of celestial branding. Eager to solidify their legitimacy in a foreign land, they actively imported Greek astronomical knowledge while also creating new myths that served their political needs. The most famous of these inventions is the constellation Coma Berenice's, or Berenice's hair. The story, promoted by the court astronomer Canon of Samos, was a masterpiece of political theater. It claimed that Queen Berenice II, wife of Ptolemy III, had vowed to cut off her beautiful hair as an offering to the gods if her husband returned safely from a dangerous military campaign. When he did, she fulfilled her vow, placing her shorn locks in the temple of Aphrodite. The next day, the hair had mysteriously vanished. The quick-thinking Canon announced that the gods had been so pleased with the offering that they had placed it among the stars, pointing to a faint cluster between Leo and Bootes that had not previously been defined as a separate constellation. This was far more than a romantic gesture. It was a brilliant piece of dynastic propaganda. It linked the Ptolemaic queen directly to the goddess Aphrodite, staked a Greek claim on the Egyptian celestial landscape, and created a permanent, shimmering monument to the piety and power of the ruling family, visible to every subject who looked up at the night sky. This practice of celestial rebranding was not confined to the Mediterranean. In China, the emperor's role as the son of heaven gave him a unique authority over the celestial bureaucracy, which was seen as a mirror of his own imperial court. Chinese emperors occasionally exercised this authority by officially renaming stars or asterisms to reflect current political triumphs, natural events, or philosophical shifts. A new bright star might be declared a celestial ambassador announcing a military victory. A familiar asterism might be renamed to honor a virtuous minister or a beloved empress, weaving their memory into the eternal tapestry of the heavens. The sky was not a static given. It was a dynamic document, and the emperor, as heaven's chief executive on earth, held the power of the celestial editor-in-chief. By altering the names and meanings of the stars, He was actively updating the relationship between heaven and earth, demonstrating that his rule was a living, evolving force that could even reshape how his people understood the cosmos itself. The sheer audacity of this act cannot be overstated. In a world where the heavens were believed to be the domain of gods and the ultimate source of order and truth, for a mortal king to claim the right to add to or edit that divine landscape was the ultimate expression of hubris and power. It sent an unmistakable message to rivals, subjects, and future generations. My influence is not bounded by the earth. My legacy will not be contained in stone that can erode or in scrolls that can burn. It is written in the eternal fire of the stars themselves. To challenge such a ruler was not just to fight a man, it was to contest a fundamental part of the universe's new design. This ability to project power directly into the celestial sphere was the final and most definitive argument for a king's divinity, proving that his will was indeed a cosmic force. Beyond the borders of their own kingdoms, the stars provided a universal language, a sophisticated diplomatic code that allowed rulers to communicate, negotiate, and form alliances on a plane far above the messy particulars of language, culture, and local gods. This was celestial diplomacy, and for the astute king, a carefully calculated ephemeris or a precisely crafted calendar was a more powerful tool than any army. Sharing this sacred knowledge was the ultimate gesture of trust and respect, a way to say, we both understand the fundamental order of the universe, and therefore we can find order between our nations. It transformed astronomy from an internal tool of legitimacy into an external currency of statecraft, building bridges between empires based on a shared perception of cosmic truth. The royal archives of the ancient Near East reveal this practice in stunning detail. Babylonian astronomical tablets, covered in meticulous cuneiform recordings of planetary movements, lunar eclipses, and stellar observations, were not kept secret. They were copied, carefully packaged, and sent as high-level diplomatic gifts from the court of the Babylonian king to his counterparts in Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and other major powers. Imagine the arrival of such a gift. It wasn't a shipment of gold or jewels, but something far more precious, data. A Babylonian tablet predicting an eclipse 5 years in the future was a demonstration of immense intellectual power and a gesture of incredible goodwill. It said, "We are so advanced we can foresee the actions of the gods, and we trust you with this knowledge." For the receiving king, accepting and understanding this data was a test of his own sophistication. It created an exclusive, intellectual bond between rulers, a shared secret of the heavens that forged a powerful alliance rooted in their mutual mastery of cosmic law. They were no longer just political partners, they were fellow initiates into the greatest mysteries of the age. The Chinese approach to this celestial statecraft was more hierarchical but equally brilliant. The emperor, as the son of heaven, held the exclusive mandate to understand and interpret the cosmic order. His court astronomers produced the official calendar, a document that dictated the rhythm of life for the entire empire. When dealing with tributary states, smaller, neighboring kingdoms that acknowledged Chinese supremacy, the emperor would often send teams of these calendar experts as part of diplomatic missions. This was not merely a technical assistance program. It was a profound political act. By gifting these states a calendar calculated by his own experts, the emperor was literally exporting his celestial authority. He was imposing his time, his rhythms, his understanding of the heavens onto their culture. The tributary king, by adopting the Chinese calendar for his own coronation dates and agricultural cycles, was implicitly accepting the Chinese cosmological worldview and, by extension, the superior position of the Chinese emperor within that cosmos. The calendar became a constant, daily reminder of where true celestial power resided, seamlessly integrating these smaller states into the Chinese sphere of influence without the need for constant military threat. In the fractured landscape of competing Maya city-states, celestial knowledge served as a unique tool for peace and fragile alliance building. Unlike the vast, contiguous empires of the Old World, Maya realms were often locked in a tense balance of power, with shifting alliances and frequent conflicts. In this environment, the most precious commodity a ruler could offer was not a promise of military support, but a carefully calculated Venus table. The Maya believed the cycles of Venus governed war and destiny, and their accuracy in predicting its movements was unparalleled. A powerful king seeking to avert a war or cement an alliance might send a delegation to a rival city-state bearing a newly calculated Venus almanac. This was the ultimate peace offering. It demonstrated respect for the rival king's intelligence and shared devotion to the same gods. By accepting and using these calculations to time his own rituals, the receiving king was entering into a sacred agreement, a pact witnessed by the war star itself. Their shared reliance on the same celestial data created a bond of mutual interest and intellectual kinship, a temporary island of cooperation in a sea of political tension, all negotiated through the silent, predictable movements of a distant planet. This exchange of astronomical knowledge did something remarkable. It elevated diplomacy from a simple matter of borders and trade agreements to a conversation about the fundamental nature of reality. When a Babylonian king and an Egyptian pharaoh compared their eclipse records and found them in agreement, it wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a moment of profound philosophical connection. They were confirming for each other that the universe operated according to predictable, knowable laws that transcended their different cultures and pantheons. This shared perception of cosmic order created a foundation for trust that was stronger than any treaty written on parchment. It meant that even if their immediate interests conflicted, they were both ultimately playing by the same set of divine rules. Their agreements were sanctified not just by their own signatures, but by the silent, motionless witness of the stars overhead. In a world without international law or the United Nations, the consistent, predictable heavens provided the only truly neutral ground upon which empires could meet, understand one another, and build a fragile peace. For a ruler presiding over a vast and culturally diverse empire, the greatest challenge was often not conquest but consolidation, how to weave together a tapestry of different peoples, languages, and gods into a single, coherent realm loyal to one crown. The most brilliant imperial strategists discovered a powerful tool for this unifying work not on the battlefield, but in the night sky. They became masters of celestial multiculturalism, a sophisticated form of political astronomy that identified the common threads of star lore running through their subject cultures. By finding the shared celestial symbols in different traditions, a ruler could present himself not as the king of one people, but as a universal monarch, a figure whose divine right to rule was written in a cosmic language every culture could understand. The stars became a diplomatic passport, granting a king legitimacy across every border within his domain. Alexander the Great was a pioneer of this technique, and his campaign through the Persian Empire was a masterclass in celestial public relations. As he moved from the Greek-influenced coasts of Anatolia into the heart of Babylon, he was acutely aware that he was navigating a shift in the celestial landscape. The Greeks looked to the mighty planet Zeus, the king of the gods who wielded thunderbolts from Mount Olympus. But in Babylon, the same brilliant, slow-moving planet was revered as Marduk, the patron god of the city, and the supreme deity who had defeated the primordial goddess of chaos, Tiamat. Alexander, tutored by Aristotle and accompanied by his own seers, understood this astronomical equivalence. Instead of imposing the Greek god upon his new subjects, he did something far more clever. He fused them. He publicly honored both Zeus and Marduk, participating in Babylonian rituals while maintaining his devotion to the Greek pantheon. This was not a contradiction, it was a strategic synthesis. By embracing both names for the same celestial power, Alexander presented himself as the chosen representative of a universal kingship god, a single divine authority that different cultures simply called by different names. His right to rule was therefore not Greek or Babylonian, it was cosmic, and thus applicable to everyone under his command. The Roman emperors, inheritors of Alexander's sprawling multicultural vision, perfected this strategy with the cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The sun is the most universal celestial body, and its daily victory over darkness and its annual promise of renewal made it a powerful symbol of power and eternity in nearly every culture the Romans absorbed. In Egypt, it was Ra, the supreme creator. In Syria, it was Elagabal. To the Persians, it was Mithras. And to the legionaries stationed from Britain to Judea, it was a familiar, potent symbol of strength and order. Emperor Orion in the 3rd century made a brilliant political calculation. He formally elevated Sol Invictus to the premier position in the state religion, building a magnificent temple and establishing games in the sun god's honor. This was not merely a personal religious preference, it was an act of imperial branding. By making the sun the central symbol of the empire, he gave every subject, regardless of their local gods, a common celestial focus for their loyalty. The emperor, as the sun's chief priest and representative on earth, became the human embodiment of this universal, life-giving force. Worshipping the sun became synonymous with loyalty to Rome, creating a powerful, cross-cultural glue that held the fracturing empire together for centuries longer than it might have otherwise. Perhaps the most delicate and intricate dance of celestial multiculturalism was performed by the Mughal emperors of India. Here, Islamic rulers of Turco-Mongol descent found themselves governing a vast population that was predominantly Hindu. The challenge was to legitimize their rule without alienating either their own Muslim base or their Hindu subjects. They achieved this through a breathtaking synthesis of celestial imagery in their coronation rituals and courtly art. The Mughals embraced the ancient Hindu and Vedic concept of the king as a Chakravartin, a universal ruler whose authority was aligned with the cosmic order, or Dharma, often symbolized by the wheel of the zodiac and the movement of the planets. They incorporated these symbols into their architecture, such as the layout of their palaces and gardens, which often reflected cosmic diagrams. Simultaneously, they maintained their Islamic identity through references to the moon and stars of the Islamic calendar and the cosmic themes present in Sufi poetry. The Mughal Emperor Akbar the Great even hosted debates between scholars of different faiths under a canopy designed to represent the heavens. By weaving together these Islamic and Hindu celestial traditions, the Mughal emperors presented themselves as something entirely new, universal sovereigns who transcended a single religious identity, their right to rule confirmed by the entire vault of heaven, appealing to the deepest cosmological understandings of all their people. But the king's celestial duties extended far beyond the temple and the battlefield, reaching directly into the granaries, storehouses, and fields that were the very lifeblood of his kingdom. This was celestial economics, a sophisticated system where the rhythms of the heavens dictated the most practical aspects of daily life: when to plant, when to harvest, how much to tax, and when to distribute food to the hungry. By weaving astronomical cycles into the fabric of the economy, the ruler transformed himself from a distant political figure into the essential manager of survival itself. a leader whose unique connection to the cosmos made him practically indispensable to every single one of his subjects. His role was to translate the silent, predictable language of the stars into a tangible plan for human prosperity, making his rule not just theologically justified but vitally necessary for the continuation of life. In ancient Egypt, this system was perfected along the banks of the Nile, where life itself was a gift of the river's annual inundation. The pharaoh's most critical economic responsibility was predicting and managing this flood. But how could one predict a natural event months in advance? The answer was written in the pre-dawn sky. Egyptian astronomer priests meticulously tracked the heliacal rising of Sirius, the brightest star in the heavens, known to them as Sopdet. They observed that the first appearance of Sirius just before sunrise, after a period of invisibility, consistently coincided with the beginning of the Nile's flood season. This celestial event was their advanced warning system. Based on the star's timing and brightness, the priests could forecast the potential height of the flood. The pharaoh would then use this celestial data to make monumental economic decisions. A prediction of a high, bountiful flood meant fertile land and a huge harvest. He could set tax rates higher, knowing the farmers could afford it. A prediction of a low flood, signaled by a faint or delayed Sirius, meant lean times ahead. He would dramatically lower taxes and order the distribution of grain from state granaries to prevent famine. The entire Egyptian economy, from the wealth of the state to the meal on a farmer's table, was calibrated by the appearance of a single, brilliant star, and the pharaoh was the sole human interpreter of this cosmic signal. On the other side of the world, the Chinese emperors operated a similarly precise system, but they looked to a different set of celestial officials, the moon and the wandering planets. The Chinese imperial calendar, a masterpiece of astronomical observation, was the central planning document for the entire economy. The lunar phases dictated the rhythm of market days and tax collections, with new and full moons often marking deadlines for payments or the opening of state-run markets. But the planetary positions were even more significant. The movements of Jupiter, the year star, were particularly important for long-term economic planning. Its 12-year circuit of the heavens was divided into 12 sections, each associated with specific agricultural and economic activities for that year. The court astronomers would issue detailed edicts. In a year when Jupiter was in the sector of the dragon, for instance, the emperor might order a focus on fishing and water management. When it moved into the sector of the horse, emphasis might shift to livestock breeding and the maintenance of courier routes. The emperor's distribution of the vast state grain reserves was also tied to these cycles. He would order the release of grain during specific planetary alignments that were deemed auspicious for nourishing the people, turning the simple act of feeding the hungry into a ritual that reinforced cosmic harmony. His economic policy was a direct enactment of the celestial order, proving his virtue through practical abundance. Perhaps the most comprehensive fusion of astronomy and economics was achieved by the Inca Empire high in the Andes. The Inca conceptualized their entire society as a single household, and the Sapa Inca was the ultimate steward, responsible for organizing all labor and redistributing all resources. This immense task was governed by a celestial calendar so precise it dictated daily life for millions. The Inca identified 12 lunar months, each named after a specific constellation that became most prominent in the night sky during that period. The heliacal rising of the Pleiades star cluster, which they called Kulka, meaning storehouse, was the most important event of the year. Its appearance in June signaled the start of the dry season and the beginning of the harvest. The entire population would then engage in a massive collective labor effort. The harvest was a state-directed activity. Conversely, when certain constellations disappeared, it signaled a time of rest and festival. The economy was not based on currency but on labor, a tax called mitre, which every household owed to the state. The Sapa Inca and his priest astronomers decided when this labor was to be performed based entirely on the stars. The building of terraces, the maintenance of irrigation canals, the weaving of cloth for state warehouses, all were scheduled during the celestial working seasons and suspended during the celestial resting seasons. This system ensured that every economic activity was performed at its most efficient and auspicious time, maximizing output and minimizing hardship, all under the benevolent, watchful guidance of a king who could read the sky's schedule. Beyond the visual splendor of star maps and planetary alignments, ancient kings sought to engage another, more profound sense to validate their rule, the sense of hearing. They believed that if the cosmos was a perfectly ordered system, then it must not only look beautiful but sound beautiful as well, emitting a silent, mathematical harmony that was the true music of creation. This ancient concept, known as the music of the spheres, proposed that the planets, as they moved through the heavens, generated a celestial symphony based on precise mathematical ratios. For a king's coronation to be truly legitimate, it couldn't just be a silent, visual spectacle. It had to sound right. His ceremony needed to replicate this divine harmony here on Earth, transforming his ascension into an acoustic bridge between the human and the celestial, proving he could not only see the order of the universe but could also hear it and conduct it for his people. In ancient China, this belief was codified into the very foundation of statecraft through the concept of the huanzhong, or the yellow bell. This was not merely a musical note, it was the fundamental pitch, the sonic anchor of the entire universe, discovered through an elaborate process involving specially calibrated pitch pipes. The length of the primary pipe was determined by carefully measured grains of black millet, and the note it produced when blown was considered the cosmic standard, the tone to which all of heaven was tuned. When an emperor was crowned, every aspect of the ceremony's music, from the solemn chants to the grand orchestral compositions, was performed in the musical mode derived from this huanzhong pitch. This was a profound acoustic declaration. By aligning the ceremony's sound with the celestial frequency, the new Son of Heaven was audibly tuning his empire to the harmony of the cosmos. His reign would not bring discord or chaos. It would be a period of perfect resonance where human affairs would move in sync with the mathematical perfection of the heavenly spheres, bringing peace, prosperity, and order simply through its correct sonic vibration. Across the world, in the ancient Greek world, the philosopher Pythagoras laid the groundwork for a similar understanding of celestial harmony. Through his experiments with vibrating strings, he discovered that pleasing musical intervals like the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth were produced by simple mathematical ratios. He and his followers then extrapolated this discovery to the cosmos, theorizing that the planets in their orbits must also be producing tones based on their speeds and distances from Earth. While we cannot hear this music, they believed it was a constant, sublime harmony. This Pythagorean concept deeply influenced Hellenistic coronation rituals. Specific musical intervals were chosen to represent specific planets and their associated gods. A melody built on perfect fifths might invoke Jupiter, the king planet, while another interval could call upon Mars for strength in battle. The coronation was thus transformed into a carefully scored celestial invocation. The new king, surrounded by this precisely calculated music, was being acoustically connected to the planetary gods, his rule sonically blessed by the very harmonies that governed the motion of the universe. His ear was now attuned to the music of the cosmos, and he would rule as its chief conductor on Earth. This practice of sacred sonic resonance finds one of its most ancient and enduring expressions in the Hindu coronation rituals of India, the Rajasuya ceremony. Here, the power of sound itself is considered the primordial creative force, and the ceremony is built upon the precise chanting of Vedic hymns known as mantras. Each mantra is not a simple prayer but a sequence of syllables believed to possess a specific vibrational power when uttered at the correct pitch and rhythm. During his crowning, the new Raja would be surrounded by a coterie of priests who would chant these hymns, aiming their collective vocal resonance not at the king's ears but at his very soul. Each mantra was targeted. Chants pitched to a deep, grounding tone were directed toward the earth, stabilizing his kingdom. Hymns sung in a higher, piercing frequency were aimed at the sun, filling him with solar vitality and wisdom. The entire ceremony was a bath of carefully orchestrated sound, designed to vibrantly align the king's being with the fundamental energies of the universe. His authority was not just given, it was sung into him, tuning his body, mind, and spirit to the same frequency as the stars he was now sworn to represent. This celestial musicianship represented the ultimate refinement of the ancient king's divine portfolio. It was one thing to build a pyramid aligned with a star or to time a coronation with a planet's rise. But to command the very sounds of the ceremony, to orchestrate music that mirrored the silent song of the spheres, this demonstrated a mastery over the invisible architecture of the cosmos itself. It proved that the king's understanding of order was not superficial or merely observational. He could perceive the deep, mathematical underpinnings of reality and reproduce them for the benefit of his people. His reign would therefore be a symphony, not a cacophony. He would resolve disputes with the consonants of a perfect fifth and administer justice with the unwavering rhythm of the celestial metronome. In a world where sound was seen as a tangible, creative force, a king crowned in harmony was quite literally composing a new era of peace and prosperity, his every decree a note in the everlasting song of the universe. Though the crowns have largely been set aside and the sacred star charts replaced by satellite data, the ancient language of celestial power still whispers through our modern halls of leadership, its metaphors and patterns so deeply embedded in our collective consciousness that we barely notice their enduring influence. We may have traded astronomer priests for political strategists and coronation rituals for inauguration ceremonies, but the need to connect earthly authority with something grander and more eternal than ourselves remains a powerful force in how we choose, perceive, and legitimize our leaders. This isn't a conscious revival of ancient practices but a profound psychological inheritance, a testament to the enduring power of the celestial blueprint. Listen closely to the language of a modern presidential inauguration, for instance. The new leader almost invariably speaks of a new dawn breaking, of a guiding star that will lead the nation forward, or of a constellation of challenges that must be faced. These are not random poetic flourishes. They are the direct descendants of the Pharaohs' claim to solar rebirth and the Babylonian king's alignment with the planet of wisdom. When a president stands before the people and invokes the imagery of light-piercing darkness, they are performing a subtle but potent piece of celestial theater, positioning themselves as the necessary force that will bring order and predictability out of chaos, much like the sun guaranteeing the return of day. The ceremony itself, often held in the open air with all eyes turned toward the leader, echoes the ancient imperative to perform one's ascension under the watchful gaze of the heavens. This celestial metaphor has also found a comfortable home in the world of corporate leadership and organizational theory. Business consultants regularly use terms like North Star to describe a company's core mission, that fixed, unchanging principle that provides direction and alignment for every decision, no matter how turbulent the market becomes. This directly mirrors the ancient use of the North Star as the ultimate symbol of stability and central authority. Executive retreats might involve constellation, exercises where team members are mapped out not by org charts but by their relationships and influences, creating a celestial map of corporate dynamics. Strategic planning sessions are filled with talk of alignments and orbits, of gravitational pulls and solar systems of influence. This language works because it taps into a deep, pre-existing understanding of how complex systems achieve harmony and purpose. A modern CEO may not claim descent from the sun god, but by framing their strategy in celestial terms, they are invoking that same ancient authority, presenting their leadership as a natural, orderly, and inevitable force within the corporate universe. Even our most audacious modern scientific endeavors carry the unmistakable imprint of this ancient tradition. Our space programs, the ultimate expression of rational scientific achievement, continue to name their most ambitious missions after the gods and heroes of old celestial myths. We send probes named Juno to orbit Jupiter and Cassini to explore Saturn, paying unconscious homage to the Roman emperors who minted coins bearing the images of those very same planetary gods. The Apollo program, which landed men on the moon, took its name from the Greek god of the sun and light, a fitting patron for a mission that brought enlightenment to a new frontier. The Artemis program, aiming to return humans to the moon, bears the name of Apollo's twin sister, the goddess of the moon herself. This is more than just a convenient naming convention. It is a profound continuation of the ritual. By launching these technological marvels under the banner of celestial deities, we are, in a very real sense, seeking their blessing and aligning our most cutting-edge efforts with the timeless stories written in the stars. Perhaps the most powerful modern symbol of this evolved celestial kinship is the International Space Station. This permanently inhabited outpost does not belong to any one nation. It circles the globe every 90 minutes, its path crossing all borders and boundaries, visible from every continent as a steady, silent star moving through the night sky. In its continuous orbit, it embodies a new kind of celestial monarchy, one not of domination, but of shared human endeavor. It is a kingship of science and cooperation, a crown worn not by a single ruler but by all of humanity. Its presence overhead is a constant physical reminder that we are all citizens of a larger cosmos, united under the same starry vault that once inspired the first priest kings. It represents the culmination of the ancient dream, a true connection between heaven and earth, but now one achieved through collective effort and shared curiosity rather than divine right claimed by a single individual. This enduring appeal of the celestial metaphor, from the boardroom to the orbiting laboratory, reveals something fundamental about the human psyche. Even stripped of its literal belief, the language of the stars retains its power to convey legitimacy, stability, and grand purpose. In an increasingly complex and fragmented world, we still instinctively look upward for our archetypes of order. We may understand the mechanics of a solar eclipse or the nuclear fusion within a star, but we haven't lost the ancient awe they inspire. This is why a leader who can compellingly articulate a North Star vision still captures our imagination, and why a human achievement that touches the heavens still feels like the fulfillment of a destiny written long ago. Our tools have changed, but our need to see our highest aspirations and our most powerful leaders reflected in the timeless patterns of the cosmos remains as constant as the northern star itself. From the pyramid texts of Egypt to the forbidden cities of China, we have journeyed through the astonishing ways ancient kings wove star patterns into the very fabric of their authority, creating intricate celestial blueprints that justified their rule for millennia. This was not primitive superstition, but a profound fusion of cutting-edge science and sophisticated statecraft, a system where astronomy served as both a sacred scripture and a practical political tool. These rulers were not merely autocrats, they were accountable to the cosmos itself, forced to continually demonstrate their cosmic worthiness through precise rituals, ethical governance, and a deep understanding of the heavens. Their legitimacy depended on their ability to maintain harmony between the earthly and the celestial realms, making them the vital link in a chain of existence that stretched from the royal court to the distant stars. The true genius of these systems lay in their breathtaking practicality. The stars provided far more than just pretty metaphors for poets. They were the functional engines of entire civilizations. They organized time itself, giving us the calendars that dictated planting and harvest, tax collection and religious festival. They structured economies with grain distribution and labor mobilization tied to the phases of the moon and the positions of planets. They provided a social structure, a grand cosmic hierarchy that offered every individual a defined place within an orderly universe. This celestial governance created a powerful sense of stability and purpose, assuring people that their king's rule was as inevitable and necessary as the rising of the sun or the turning of the seasons. It was a holistic world, where politics, science, religion, and daily life were seamlessly intertwined under the vast, starry dome of the night sky. Now, when we look up at that same night sky, we are gazing upon the very same constellations that once crowned pharaohs and guided Chinese emperors. The same belt of Orion that signaled the rebirth of an Egyptian king still hangs in our winter heavens. The same North Star that anchored the Forbidden City's design still guides travelers today. This continuity is a powerful reminder that our human quest for meaning and order, for connecting our small lives to something grand and eternal, has always compelled us to look upward for answers. We may have replaced the court astronomer with the astrophysicist and the sacred text with the satellite image, but the fundamental yearning to find our place in the cosmos remains unchanged. Perhaps this is why, even in our modern scientific age, we still instinctively understand leadership through the language of the stars. We may no longer believe a king literally becomes a star at death, but we still describe visionary leaders as those who provide a North Star for their organization, a fixed point of principle and direction in a chaotic world. We speak of a leader's orbit of influence and of teams finding the right alignment. These are not dead metaphors, they are the echoes of an ancient truth that resonates deep within us. Something in the human spirit still believes that the best rulers, the most legitimate and trustworthy leaders, are those who can navigate by the eternal, unchanging truths above, who can chart a course for their people not by the shifting winds of popular opinion, but by the fixed and reliable light of the stars. Our ancestors may have built ziggurats and pyramids to reach them, but we still look up, forever searching for that celestial blueprint to guide us home. If this journey through the cosmic courts of ancient kings has reshaped how you see the night sky, I'd love to hear which celestial practice surprised you the most. Was it the Egyptian pharaoh's belief in becoming an imperishable star, the Maya king's precise timing with Venus, or the Chinese emperor's intricate mandate of heaven tied to eclipse predictions? Dive into the comments and share your thoughts. This community thrives on your curiosity and insights. Your perspective adds another layer to our understanding of these ancient wonders. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss our next adventure into history's hidden patterns. There are countless more mysteries to explore, from sacred geometry to lost languages, and your support makes these deep dives possible. Thank you for watching, for wondering, and for wandering through time with me. Until we meet again under the same stars that guided the ancients, keep looking up. The cosmos is an endless library, and every constellation has a story